I'm really excited to be here today because these kind of forums give a unique opportunity for people like me to come and interact with some of the industry leaders in the financial segment, services segment. Not only do I get to share the insights that I have, but it's a great opportunity for me to learn from the experiences that all of you have. And the panel discussion today morning, just before this session, was one such thing. Talking about experiences, what I'm going to be talking about here today is demystifying AI for customer experience. Now, if you think about it, there are, organizations are currently dealing with various kinds of transformational technologies in which the centerpiece of everything is becoming customer experience, and experiences are becoming extremely important. So we at LogMeIn, although we do create a great integrated digital customer experience platform, but really, for us, the research and the work that goes behind thinking about how these experience journeys has been transforming has been the centerpiece of the creation of our technology. So why do we do this research? Well, not only does it help us keep pace or pulse on what's happening in the market, it also shapes some of the product roadmaps that we deliver. It also shapes our ability to advise our customers about when they're thinking about customer experience journeys in their environments or their businesses, how can they take leverage experiences from not just their industries, but elsewhere as well, and bring it into their own environment. So what I'm going to share today with you is some such insights, and hopefully this will be of meaning for you and of use for you. Let me start by, so in the last year, we talked to 850 business decision makers, and it's spread data from all over the globe. So you can see we talked to people in North America, Europe, Southeast Asia, as well as India. And a representation of this comes from organizations which are mid in nature, mid in size, which is 500 employees or above, and all the way up to large organizations based out of anywhere in the world, and industries that they represent. So they come from financial services industries, technology industries, retail industries, and so on and so forth. Now, why is it important for us to get such a broad-based data to come and share it with you? Sometime back, I was talking to a large insurance provider in India, chief digital officer in that environment, and he was talking to me about, we were talking about customer experience, and he came and he was asking me questions, questions after questions, specifically around how telecom companies are thinking about customer experience. And I was very intrigued, and I asked him, sir, do you mind telling me why do you want to know about customer experience in a telecom scenario? And I thought, I came for my meeting prepared with everything that I knew about insurance and customer experience. And he said, look, given the state of India, what it is today, we are considered to be the leaders in our space. So I'm sure you would have guessed the name of the company by now. And we are doing everything that we can to make sure that our customers have a very good customer experience. Having said that, insurance is still a numbers game. We have less than 1 or 2% of India's population actually signing up for insurance of various kinds, right? And we struggle to understand how do I drive people to come in and make more insurance. And that's where a parallel industry that we want to look at is telecom, because telecom always has been at the forefront of having more consumers sign up. So if they are doing something out there and we can learn from that, that's something that we want to leverage in our environment. I thought that perspective was pretty unique, because it's not just learning from your own industry, but as a leader in that industry, learning from some other industry segment on what are they doing, pick up those gems, and probably apply that to their business environment. So this is not just the business decision makers. We also spoke to consumers, because end of the day, heart of it will always be consumers. So what are the consumers saying when it comes to experiences? And really the question is, have you interacted with a brand, any kind of a brand, in the last 6 months? And if your answer is yes, then we want to talk to you. And as you can see, this diaspora of this is pretty different. The consumers came from various different locations, gender profiles, and age brackets. So that's where we are in terms of the sample set that we took. Let me talk about what were the findings that we had out of this. So first and foremost, we were interested in knowing about what are the ways that consumers are interacting or engaging with any kind of a brand. And there were some interesting insights that came out. Anyone wants to make a guess at what the most preferred mode of interacting with a brand would be? You have a gift. Okay. So yeah, no surprises there. Telephone still is the primary way of consumers to interact with any kind of a brand, right? And while research of some sorts has proven that this is in the decline, it's still a very significant piece. And think about it. The reason why it's still significant is because businesses are still giving that as an option. And there are some businesses who don't give that as an option. I'll give you an example. How many of you have used Uber? Ever tried contacting their contact center? They don't have a contact center. They want all of their users to come in and interact with them only on a digital channel. Well, that's a different industry altogether. But those things are becoming possible now. What we realize is that the digital channels all put together are now starting to become more than 50% of the way consumers are interacting with brands. Now, why is that important? We tend to look at digital channels in, there are so many of them. There are so many digital channels, so we tend to look at them in different buckets. But if you club them all together and see about what are the digital channels that brands are making available for their consumers to interact, put together, they're becoming a pretty sizable unit. So that's the finding. And we also asked these consumers about how do they think about when it comes to the future, what will be the most used channels that they will interact with a brand on. And there were some interesting insights that came out here as well. If you notice, the telephone channel is supposed to be dropping by 22%. And over the last decade or so that we've been doing this research, we've realized that not always the numbers that are coming out are realistic. People are saying that there will be a huge decline in that, but is it really going to be 22%? I don't know. Nobody knows about that. But the other flip side of this is that you see there are some technologies which will be adopted a lot more, like, for example, a chat or a chat bot, right? Will it grow by another 20%? I don't know. But will it be the fastest growing channel in that segment? Absolutely. I think everybody can be certain about those, that there will be a higher adoption of those kinds of technologies. So that's the other thing that came out to be pretty interesting in that, in the survey. So now that we arrived at that, we were thinking about how are businesses doing in this environment. So we took stock of, thinking about how businesses are doing in that, and because not only were we concerned about what are the channels which are there, but we were also thinking about what is the quality of that experience that you're giving to your consumers. And we started talking to businesses, and this is what we found. Now, I always present this slide because if you notice at the footnote, this is not a last year's survey. This is a survey which was taken 13 years back, in 2005. And this was done by Bain & Company. And if some of you are aware of this terminology called NPS, Net Promoter Score, Frederick Reichald, who's the father of Net Promoter Score, actually did the study. So what did he ask people? He asked businesses about how do you think you are doing in terms of customer experience. And 80% of the CEOs believe that they are giving a very good customer experience. On the flip side of it, their consumers, only 8% of them thought that the brands are actually delivering customer experience. Now, why is it important to look at this kind of data, which is so dated? The importance is for us to look at this data and then to start and see how actually can we change the research that we do around consumers. How can we ask relevant questions? Because there is a huge amount of difference between how a business is thinking about them and how their consumers are thinking about the same experience. So it started dawning on us that we've got to really ask consumers things which matter to them and not the things that matter to the businesses to represent a data set. So that's where we started changing the research that we were doing in these areas. So what came out of that? Where do you think the problem is? So by far the number one reason that emerged of where the experience was a huge problem was the speed or time that it takes to resolve an issue. Now, there are various sub-segments of this data, but if you really look at it, 84% of consumers were saying that it takes far too long for an issue to get resolved, or for an interaction to be satisfactory to their point of view. That's a pretty big segment, 84% of that. And more often than not, when we start digging into this data, we realize that consumers are not hesitant taking retaliatory action because of a poor customer experience. And they also bucketed it in various different, so they could give a low score on your customer satisfaction survey, make a complaint directly to a brand, although I personally feel that making a complaint directly to a brand should not be rated as a retaliatory action. That's a good feedback for any brand to get, direct feedback from their consumers. But what stood out there was that there were a lot of areas where consumers were not hesitant moving away because of one poor experience that any brand gave to them. And while I said that speed and time was the #1 factor, there were other factors as well. And some of these factors that it's pretty common as an experience that you would have also experienced in your journeys of interacting with brands is you had to repeat your problems over and over again. So you're talking to an agent one, you go back to somebody else, some other channel, and you have to re-explain the hard problem. What's surprising, what stood out of this slide that I'm presenting is that 1 out of 5 people actually reported that their problem never got solved, which is very significant. So why are these problems happening? And when we started looking at the research data with a little bit more details, what we realize is that there are primarily 2 reasons that these problems are occurring. First reason is that agents don't have tools that they need. So every time somebody goes and talks to your customer service representatives, more often than not, the customer service representatives are struggling to provide a good customer experience to them. And the second is the way businesses and consumers measure the time of interaction or the experience of interaction. So let me just dwell a little into these 2 reasons. So the first one being, what data showed us is that only 41% of any representative's time is actually being spent on resolving an issue. So the balance 59% of times, that person is either going through systems of record to find information or try to find solutions that can solve a customer experience issue. And there is some good news. In the past, in the last year, businesses reported that on an average, there are 3 systems or 3 tools or 3 technologies that any customer service representative is using to solve a business issue or a customer issue. In the past, this data used to be on 7 or 8 systems. And in the panel conversation before that, the speakers were alluding to this point that there are a lot of system of records which exist inside, probably not interconnected with each other, so operate in silos. And that's where most of the times for people who were essentially tasked with the job of making a good customer experience were actually struggling with. So that's on the point #1. On the negative side, a huge percentage of customers reported problems that it was not getting solved in the first instance. Now, what stood out to me in this slide was 2 things. One is that telecoms, by means of their adoption of technology, financial services are at the higher end of the bracket. But ironically, technology companies were at the lowest at this point in terms of having a first contact experience being given to the consumers, which was meaningful for them. So I spoke about measuring resolution time. I'll give you an example of how businesses are measuring resolution time or experience time and how customers are thinking about it. So picture this, a call at 10 a.m. which lasted for 5 minutes, and a repeat call on the same subject at 5 p.m., which lasted 7 minutes, businesses measured this as an experience for 12 minutes, because that's how the systems are designed to be. But on the flip side, the consumers measured this as a 7-hour experience, because for them, the issue was not resolved. For them, the experience was still broken, that I had to call up a second time, I had to interact with somebody who I had to explain my whole problem, and then get a resolution for that. So how will businesses improve customer experience in 2019? And the research that came out, or the data that came out of this research, showed that 72 businesses overall will deploy a lot more technology than what is being adopted right now. And I'm just picking up 1 or 2 examples. I had a blockchain example. I couldn't find relevant data on that to showcase to you. But I'm going to give you an example of chatbots. And 72% businesses actually said that they're going to be using more of a chatbot technology to reduce the amount of time it takes to solve a customer experience situation. And if you notice there, India has been at the top end of this. And why is it? I mean, India has always been known as a technology hotbed, or for a very long time as a contact center or the back office of the world. But there's a very high appetite for businesses in India to adopt the chatbot or the artificial intelligence technology. On the other hand, the AI experiences are also changing. So while the consumers said, when we asked this question to consumers and businesses about, would you mind interacting with a technology in the first place rather than a human being in the first place? And the answers from 2 different point of views, which is consumers saying 55% of consumers didn't mind talking to a technology first. But 76% of businesses thought that it would be better for them. So in my previous slides, I presented to you how there was a disconnect between data that comes out versus the reality of the asks that the consumers are having. There is still a disconnect. But then what does that mean? It means that businesses adopting technology will be faster, and the consumers will start getting aligned to how to use that experience and then make more use of that. So we asked organization, what type of solution will your organization use to differentiate between these customer experience scenarios that you're getting currently? And a significant portion of them, they said that they want a solution which is designed specifically for customer engagement, which means what? I have all the system of records that exist in my organization, but there isn't a system of record which actually talks about customer experience as the center of it. Most organizations don't reverse engineer their process outward in, which is they're not thinking about how the customer is consuming is, and then how do I pull that back and create that as an experience. And about 61% of them actually said that they will invest more in terms of either building or creating a solution which is specifically designed for customer experience. I'll just take 2 more minutes on an executive summary. So we talked about that there's a disconnect, there's a huge disconnect between how businesses and consumers view customer experience. Also, the time to resolve is the biggest factor which is coming out. And then any investment in artificial intelligence is going to give brands a very big competitive advantage in their customer experience journey. Let me give you one example of an impact of how this is transformed. So a top global bank, and this is Royal Bank of Scotland, they adopted an intelligent digital experience platform in their environment. And some of the results that they got was that they transformed their journey of having 350,000 interactions a month to over 2 million interactions a month, and had better access to content. And this was all for their customer experience journey. But that's not where it stops. It actually was a very big investment for them from an insight standpoint also. So any technology that you deploy for, and this is one of the other research that we did, we realized that out of the 1,800 deployments that we have done so far, the organizations who found maximum impact coming out of deploying a solution for their external environment, which means their consumers or their customers, actually started using AI as a technology internally for their HR, for their IT systems, for all of the other mundane things that all of the organizations struggle with for doing it. And the advantage was so huge that the laggards or the leaders actually outperformed the laggards by 3 times. And any project that you personally would have got involved inside your organization for artificial intelligence, you would realize this, that the biggest stumbling block inside an organization would be change management. And that's why an adoption internally accelerates the organization's ability to take that technology outside and provide it to their consumers. There are various, the previous panel conversation was talking about Fannie Mae. I think they're doing remarkable work when it comes to using all kinds of technology to bring into their environment and make sure that their customer experience transform. But there are other examples, including organizations in India and worldwide, who, from a financial services industry standpoint, are bringing this to their advantage. So I'll wrap it up at that, and I guess I have no time for answering any questions, but I'm available here for the rest of the day, and I look forward to interacting with you. Thank you.